Good evening. It's Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, and we're talking weather set up across the southeast. I'm going to make the case for severe weather over the next couple of days, as well as talking about the potential for cold to return as we go past the New Year's, and then even the chance for snow across the south. Yes, you heard that correct. Snow across the south. No, I don't think it's likely at this point, and we're still going to have to time things out, but at least there is the pattern showing the possibility of it. So if you want it, this is what you want to look out for, and certainly I'm going to highlight those things. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about what's going on out now. We've got a strong little shortwave that's just a reference for a piece of energy rotation in the atmosphere. So you can see the trough axis here situated like that, and a nice low pressure system that has developed right along that axis. So there's a low pressure system right here. You can see that spin nicely, and a very strong little cold front right here like that, and the thunderstorms going right along it. We've got a little bit of dry air out ahead of it and enough shear, which means the wind coming more or less out of the south and east ahead of this system, and then some backing on the backside of the system to create some least modest rotation efforts basically through this area as we go through the next 48 hours, and that's going to continue. This round of weather really not going to make much of an impact across the panhandle until Sunday. So we got a while before we get there. This, for the most part, is going to move up into the north and east. There's another piece of energy that's back here, and that's going to eject out behind it. And as that comes in and combines with this frontal boundary as it's further off to the north, that's when we'll see the setup for a cold front to come through our area. The question mark is going to be how much air, dry air, is still wedged in on the east coast here, and how much does that really help to keep cloud cover around, as well as maybe some ongoing shower activity through this corridor to possibly limit severe weather going up into the mid-Atlantic and in the Carolinas. But funny enough, as this low pressure system really wraps itself up here as we get into Sunday and we get this next piece of energy in, there's actually going to be a lot more shear. So we'll see a stronger wind shear vector coming out of the south and east. Unfortunately, for those that want severe weather through here, you do have that dry air wedge still in place. That's the reason why we've got the cloud cover out there now. So that's keeping the moisture overriding, and that's happening aloft as opposed to at the surface. So this is really going to be a surface sensibility question. So depending on how much we recover the air going into Sunday on the cloud cover overnight and the shower activity will really depend on the severe threat downstream compared to what's going on today, what will be going on over the day tomorrow, and then again on Saturday. Again, mostly focuses in on this area, which does exclude the panhandle because most of that energy is going to stay off to the north. So on Sunday, yes, I think severe weather is at least possible basically through this corridor here, but it's going to have to play out right, and we're going to have to see the correct things come around. So shear will be around, so I'm at least saying there's at least a low risk of severe weather, but certainly not the risk that we've got through this area, basically the Action Jackson area. So Jackson, Mississippi. If you don't know, Jackson, Mississippi is one of the busiest areas for tornadic activity in the country. Yes, rivaling the tornado activity across the plains. There's a reason why it's called Action Jackson. For sure. There's lots of tornado activity there, especially this time of year. When we get these low pressure systems to dive south, this really is a prime season for severe weather across the deep south if things play out right. And it's kind of the same way with snow. Got to get the timing right, got to get the moisture right, got to have all the setup right. Same thing with severe weather. But both of those actually playing a role in the forecast as we go forward. So we're going to move along and get right into it. Here as we go into the surface analysis of what is going on. I think I did a pretty decent job there of setting up what we have and then talking about what's coming. So going forward here, working on some graphics for the show coming up, but going forward, you can see that strong low pressure system working up into Mississippi, and that heads toward the Great Lakes. That leaves a boundary for us and brings us a chance at scattered showers through our Friday and then again on Saturday, including much of the southeast. You can still see the wedge holding on really strong there into the Carolinas. That's going to continue as we move forward as well. That will continue to wedge in that dry air. So here comes the severe weather setup. So across Mississippi, northern Alabama, I certainly would be paying attention basically where you see the green on the map from the cursor here. So basically across this area where we do have an enhanced risk, that's where severe weather could really be potent on Saturday. On Sunday, you'll note the cold front gets a little more stretched. Yes, there's better shear here. So this corridor that I just highlighted, basically western panhandle into the Piedmont of the Carolinas, that's where severe weather really could be an issue on Sunday. But note the timing. 6 a.m. when the cold front comes in, so it's possible we just don't have enough instability at the surface, and by the time storms do get cranking, we've really worked into an air mass that has been worked over. So maybe not a whole lot going on. If we do have something that's going on there and there is energy, it's probably going to be in the mid levels, which supports more of a wind threat, maybe even possibly really not any cold air aloft, but I would say maybe some hail threat as well. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But it's messy, the setup for Sunday. It's possible, but it's messy. Beyond that, we really calm things down. We have another short wave that comes through the middle of the country there, through the Ohio River Valley. If it attaches to the Arctic front you see here coming on New Year's Eve, then we could have a stronger storm system there. That was the storm system that the Euro was throwing underneath this cold air about a week ago, and the GFS kind of lagged behind to bring some snow to the mid-Atlantic. You can see that it's kind of phased that out as it's not showing phasing with that Arctic front, but there is still plenty of opportunity for some overriding moisture like you just saw there across portions of the southeast, maybe following that Arctic front. Not sure I buy that precipitation holding on, or that those pieces of energy don't phase all the way together at this point, considering we're talking about the end of next week. But again, we'll see how things play out. Really what we do know here is colder air is going to come back toward the end of next week. How cold, well, and how long, that is still a question mark. We could be talking about the potential for several hard freezes across our area, and maybe a period of prolonged below average temperatures as we go through January into the middle of January. And again, maybe multiple chances for snow across the south. Probably not in the panhandle of Florida, because historically that is rare and we need a perfect setup for it. But at least the pattern is showing the favorability for colder air to be around and plenty of moisture to be working around. Now the question is, are we going to time it out? So you can see on the severe weather setup here, we've got that dry air wedged in. Just how much we can move it on out is going to depend on whether we can recover that air on Sunday. So I'm a little bit iffy on that. But as we go into Monday, you can see the warmer air still holding on. Here comes the first of the Arctic fronts with that little shortwave that's rotating around the upper level low. It'll be north of the Great Lakes, basically between the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay in Canada. That's going to start to bring the first piece of polar energy south as we get toward the end of next week. And typically these troughs just dig in and then eject off to the east. But you can see a big subtropical ridge here building, and that's going to keep this boundary of warm air right there. And what that's going to do is that's going to force our low pressure systems to run up the coast and then back into that upper level low. So as we move this forward, you would even see that trough digging in even more. So if that ends up being the case, we could talk about the period of cold continuing and even prolonging. And for those, we're going to go back here. I'm going to jump into that frame and go to the end because I want to draw a little bit in here. For those that do want snow, this is really the setup that you want to look for, because basically what you need is you need a high pressure system here, and you need it to be dumping cold air across the midsection. In reality, if you want snow across the panhandle, you need the high pressure system to line up this far south, and you need this trough to basically dig in like that, and you need the storm path to come like that. So you can see where we are going to screw up here and where we're not going to get the cold air deep enough if you do want snow in the deep south. Basically, you're going to have to wait until the middle of the month where maybe we're talking about a deep enough trough. But with the storm pattern here, basically is going to line up like this. So if you want snow out of this pattern, you're going to need to have something come underneath this ridge, eject out of here, and then a low pressure system run like that. That means rain and storms for the panhandle, not snow. But on the back side of that, if you can get a low that works up the coast, then you could be talking about snow. So even with this storm track, if you get something to come out here and you get enough cold air to dive on the backside of this, then we could have flurries or something like that develop on the backside of that with these bouts of colder air. That's certainly much more realistic than measurable snow across the panhandle. But with the colder air coming, I think the possibility of at least some flurries flying at some point in time in January here or nearby, maybe 3 or 4 hours to the north, is very possible. I don't know if I'd say plausible yet, but very possible. In this pattern, the most likely area to see snow is probably going to be in this area. So the higher elevations and then going into Tennessee, And then maybe if you can sneak something far enough south, we might be able to dive this down into this corridor. So that's what I'm talking about. If you're on the I-85 corridor going back up into northern portions of the south here, that's going to be the best chance at maybe getting lucky with the timing on these overall systems and how this plays out. But for now, that's really as far as we can see forward. I'd love to go into the speculative stuff and really get into the other things, but that's just not reasonable at this point in time. So there's really a reality here, and that I usually relate out, which is like the forecast is like a painting. And you're painting the pictures, you can see the picture. When we're 10 days out, you're standing basically 100 yards away from that painting. You know it's a painting. You can see maybe the subject of the painting. You might be able to see a little bit of details, but it's really, really blurry. By the time we get to about 5 days out, it's like standing on the 50-yard line. You certainly can see it, or it's about standing like 50 yards away from the painting, or 150 feet away from the painting. Yeah, you can see the deal, you can see the details, but you're not going to see it clearly. And then as we get about 2 or 3 days out, that's when you're going to be standing within maybe 20, 30 feet of the painting. So you're going to be able to pick out details, you're going to be able to have information and give that information out, but it's really not until we're about 48 hours out or less that we can start to see the fine tune of things. So precipitation amounts, totals as far as snow accumulation or ice, so the details, the specifics. Even with severe weather, we may have 48 hours of lead time on the overall setup, but it's really 24 hours out. You really got to hone in. So that's just where we are with weather. We're getting really good at being able to pick out patterns even in the long range, and we're getting good at picking out these details, but you have to be reasonable about your expectations when it comes to forecasts, because we are talking about the future, and we're talking about the future based on probability, something that most people are atrocious at understanding. Just don't get probability in any way, shape, or form. And so the forecast really is what is most probable, or what is most likely. It is not a guarantee, and we're certainly not stamping behind it saying, yeah, this absolutely is going to happen. That's not our job. Our job is to inform you what is most likely going to occur. And then the way I do it is I really want to inform you on what the most challenging aspects of that may be and how that might impact you. That, to me, is much more important than getting the forecast details correct, especially in the long range. Once we get close, sure, absolutely, dive into it, get all of that information correct. And for you, you should be focused on your specific impacts. Or if you're just a weather hobbyist and you just enjoy hearing about the weather, ask questions, learn more about those kinds of things. But certainly understand there is a reasonable timeline to forecast. And most people don't understand that reasonable timeline, or even understand the rationale behind the 24-hour forecast, let alone going 7 to 10 days out and even 14, 15, or months out, which once you get out to months, you really are just talking pattern and probability of pattern, really not even pattern at that point in time. So that's why I don't like long range forecasts. They're very speculative, and basically you need everything to go right that you think is going to happen for those patterns to establish. We get good at guessing at what patterns may develop, but we really aren't that great at this point in the long range forecast of knowing what patterns will certainly develop. We have an idea of a range of what will happen, but we definitely don't know what will happen as we go forward. So that's just where we are. So have a reasonable expectation and have reasonable expectations of the forecast as well. So yeah, I think that's where we're going to leave it. And until next time, we'll jump back on here. Obviously, you can catch me on air if you are in the Panhandle and you're watching at 5, 6, and 10.